Now, the second trend is the one of interest for me is AI. And the second trend that Sia mentioned is AI, intelligent automation of security. And this is one aspect where I think, in the early days of smart devices, a lot of people thought it was AI driven, but really it was because it was connectivity and it was a lot of automation happening. So how is this differentiating, or how is this accelerating now, especially with the way these AI architectures are allowing automations in the security system to even scale at a higher volume? So what are your perspectives of that megatrend number two?
Well, really, when we look at it from a security perspective, there's AI that the world's looking at today, and there's AI the way security views it. And when the security industry is looking at AI, they're really looking to create more efficient operations at the end of the day, right? When you have a guard sitting there staring at all these alarms that are coming in at them, can we use AI to help with that erroneous activity of trying to clear all these false alarms and being able to identify things in the video that would be, oh, so and so is moving a sofa in today,
Yeah.
right? Like, so you're not
Yep.
running, got guys in a golf cart running around the building because somebody decided to move a sofa in the building. So how can we make that job easier, more efficient for these operators? And then the other key thing is how do we create actionable insights? We got this plethora of information coming in from all these different edge-based sensors.
Yes.
How do we create actionable insights from all of those data sets? And it may or may not be for a security application, as one of the next megatrends we'll discuss.
Yep.
We'll talk about, but it's really about monitoring and creating more efficient operations is
Hmm.
is is how I see it. I had one conversation with a gentleman in healthcare, and they deployed body cameras,
Hmm.
and it was interesting because he told me that the biggest impact that body camera technology spend had on their organization was they were leveraging AI and behavioral analytics,
Hmm.
and they were starting to use it for training more than they were for like evidence and prosecution and
Yep.
legal reasons. They were able to go back and review different types of incidents and that would happen, and train the staff to look for things like body posture and maybe some type of facial language or something that would have indicated that this is escalating and it's time to start de-escalating. So training is being leveraged for as well in order to help improve the staff. Now there are a lot of challenges with that, obviously, and we do have factors limiting the use of AI, and one of it is the public perception of AI and
Yes.
privacy,
Hmm.
and how do we part of setting up guardrails for AI is how do we anonymize that data so we can preserve the privacy of the individuals involved. And there's also, as we were talking about in the first trend, is there is a lack of skill sets out there in
Yeah.
understanding of AI, language models, and how do I train a model and refine a model and things like that. And that's where we're starting to see some of these new players come into the play or into the fold. But then there's also the lack of internal governance. Everybody's
Yes.
been sitting on that fence waiting for regulations
Hmm.
and going, okay, well, when the government tells me what we can do, we're going to do it, right? And then now I got to marry my internal governance with legislation. And so there's some challenges with organizations that are really laying out that roadmap for internal governance for their organization and how they're going to apply and use AI.
Yeah, no, no, I totally agree. And going back to your first point about how a lot of systems or a lot of organizations are looking to improve efficiencies of their operations. It's not just the technology itself, right? It's also them understanding that there's people involved, there's processes, and then they're looking at those processes and they're trying to find, how do I make them like much more efficient, much more leaner, much more quicker, instead of having an operator take 15, 20 minutes to look for a video incident, that it takes only a matter of minutes or a matter of seconds for them to find that. And I think one of the key things that we start to see AI improved over the last couple of years is kind of like when we went through the digitalization of analog to IP. When we went to the digitalization, what was the great thing that improved recording? No one really recorded 24/7 anymore unless there was a mandate to do so. They were recording based on motion. So digitalizing the image to do motion detection was a huge aspect at that time. And I think now that video motion now is becoming this new standard of detecting people and vehicles with AI. So now with the object detection aspect of AI, you're seeing those efficiencies go even more, right? So then, like you were saying, it's now an operator can see if somebody's moving furniture in, that's not going to be an incident that they're going to need to report on, where they can take the ability for these AI models to detect people and vehicles, and specifically in the security industry, where people and vehicles are the two top major objects to really detect. Because once you have that, you can kind of build functions and processes around people and vehicles, right? For a security and safety perspective. So I think that is the first step in automating this and making it very standard and baseline with the industry. Will there be more? I think there will be, because as people get more comfortable with the technology, they're always going to ask, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this more? Right? So it's good to have the baseline, but then all of a sudden you're going to see the customers, and it goes back to the customer asking for more capabilities and things like that. And I think that aspect of the automation aspect of things and shortening it out and making it much more efficient is going to be very key. And I think when I speak on AI, I always try to go back to the triangle, right? It's always been known that people, process, and technology are very common in like the whole loop of the grand scheme of like being successful in implementing a system. And I think that's going to be very key. So yeah, your perspective is very insightful when it comes to a lot of things happening in that realm. So appreciate that. That's a really good topic, and already we're starting to see a little bit of that, plus the mega trend number one kind of bleeding over, right? Because there is going to
Yeah.
be some common red threads across all the mega trends, and I think lastly in this section when you were talking about legislation, I think that's going to be very key as well too, because it's still very new. I kind of analogize this as kind of like the early days of like the late '90s with the internet, where everybody
Yep.
knows internet's going to be very powerful, but we need guardrails because as good as you can benefit from the internet, there's some bad things that can happen as well too. I think the same thing is going to be the same approach with AI, where I think the upside could be much more better, more slated, or more leaning towards the upside versus the downside. But again, there is downsides to any technology, and
Yeah.
and, and how do we put guardrails around that? Whether it's regulations, laws, or whether it's even self-regulation, right? A lot of organizations, they're not going to wait for the government. They're going to end up putting out their own framework and see if they can get a coalition or a collaboration between others to kind of conform to it. So the only thing I know of regulation is like NIST is working on something, and I know ISO is working on something because I'm part of SIA's AI advisory board, and we've looked into some of those reference frameworks to see what can we build off of. And I know EU is leading the pack too, but for us in the Americas, it's always federal, but then it's also state as well too. So we need to be very cognizant of that. I think for us at ASIS, we're always looking at that and making sure our members are up to speed on some of the things that are coming on the radar.
Yeah, you brought up Europe, and they came up with their standard or guidelines for the use of AI, and in the U.S. it is a little complicated, a little more
It is.
complicated because you do have the federal and you have the states doing their individual things, so it can be very complicated in the U.S.
Yep, for sure.
Mhm.
So